Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. I've been trying so hard not to talk about the recent spate of school shootings in North America because it's a topic that seems to be being done to death by everybody. But, you know, if if we wave the cookie in a dog's face long enough, eventually it's going to take notice. Whether it bites or not, that's up to the individual dog and how well trained they are. I've been noticing that there's kind of a pattern to these school shooters. And the one most interesting thing about them is they all, pretty much, according to reports, and investigations are ongoing, but they all seem to be right wing leaning. Now, that may not mean they directly identify with Antifa or QAnon or any of those other organizations, but the curious step in logic, maybe logic is the wrong word. Let's go with reasoning. The curious step in reasoning is they go from a platform that's, how do I say this, is not racially tolerant, is not economically tolerant, and for that, they choose to target a school. It's perplexing. Now, admittedly, schools tend to be perceived as liberal. And maybe in grade school and high school, that is the case. It's been rather a long time since Silverlight has dealt with either. But I can tell you, in college and in university, there are plenty of conservative people there. Not just the students, but the professors. And I imagine that same mix holds true with the younger grades. So, in a vacuum, let's take a decision. And I'm going to use specifics here. You are an angry, young, white male. Sorry, that's what the demographics average out to, from Columbine up to Highland. You're an angry, young, white male. Something has happened to trigger you and drive you to the point of committing violence. One of the things that we have to remember for children, and yes, in high school you're still a child in my opinion. For children, school forms a lot of their world. As a matter of fact, some teenagers, their entire life does revolve around school, whether it's after school activities, sports, clubs, whatever it may be. And of course, there's always, little Betty and Becky's little group that are gossiping about everyone. School is their natural environment. It's like a fish to water. They understand it. When they're there, they know, okay, the jocks and the bullies are over there. Am I a jock or a bully? No. I'm a goth. I'm a geek. I'm a, whatever, the musician that's not understood. Whatever clique that you belong to, students naturally understand the ecosystem. And they will gravitate to whatever it was. When I was in high school, I hung out with the stage and lighting crew because they were mostly gamers. So by doing that, not only did we get access to all the really cool behind the scenes stuff like stages and stuff like that, but it also was a good way to avoid the bullies and whatever idiot was deciding to make trouble that week. We could go somewhere for, between lunch hour and breaks and everything. That would give us a good long time to just hang out. Kids naturally understand this. It's kind of like an office workplace, and we do have a history of office and workplace shootings. Remember, the expression going postal doesn't appear out of a vacuum. It comes out from a lot of incidents. But that whole going postal and shooting up your workplace, again, we see the same logic being applied. I hate to call it logic, but even illogic has a form of logic to it, to quote Mr. Spock. If you were at a gym every single day and you were going to be training as an Olympian and you had one of these mental snaps, probably that gym would be the place that you would enact your vengeance. It's kind of logical. It's a system of reasoning that's not pleasant, but the same token, it's one I wonder why people don't understand more. Yes, these right-wing people do have beefs with particular groups. Yes, they do sometimes go after places other than schools and workplaces, but they're pretty indiscriminate when it comes to who inside of that environment that they decide to unalive. Sometimes the YouTube algorithm picks up on those other words and that doesn't like it. So I guess I'll try to use unalive from now on. And these unaliving specialists, again, coming from white middle-class families, get a hold of guns. Now, there's a curious one with this Highland Park, that he apparently had a high-powered rifle, which I consider the least interesting piece of information possible. It's a rifle. Whether high-powered, low-powered, etc., it's still going to do a lot of damage. Yes, a 22 is going to do a lot less damage than a 50 caliber, but when you're dealing with a mass unaliving, guess what? It doesn't make a difference. If you're in the line of sight, it's going to hurt just as much. Got a better chance of surviving with the 22, but I don't want to be in front of either, personally. But the idiot in Highland Park managed to get himself captured. I'm very interested to see what studies are done on him, because there's something not right. He was a musician, and he uploaded some videos to SoundCloud, I believe it was. And I've seen them. For a high school rapper attempting to become famous, they're not terrible. Not something I would choose to listen to. But even in his videos, they all basically look like they take place in a schoolroom, because that's his frame of reference for the world. So where's this all going? Well, I'm choosing their target zones on purpose. It said travel broadens the mind, and it also exposes you to new and interesting places. Well, our unaliving specialists, their lives are so locked into their school that's like a gravitational pull. They don't know where to find a concentration of the people that they hate, aside from the ones at their school. And that for them presents a very serious dilemma. Most of these kids are known to the police, they have prior records, and none of that should prejudice us. We're trying to slice away what's happening for diagnosis. We're not trying to stab the thing in the heart and get it over with. But taken together, this should be a warning sign. Not to take away their freedoms and lock them up, but at the same token, definitely some kind of therapy is required so that they have a place to talk it out. Perhaps some medication. I don't know how far we want to go with this before we trip into one flew over the cuckoo's nest territory. We need to start developing a better plan. Now, as you've seen in earlier videos, I make little dioramas. I have 10,000 ideas in my head at any given time, maybe one of which is any good. And I've tried to reorganize a school in such a way to minimize the number of people that would be exposed to an attacker. It's impossible if you also want the police to be able to successfully come in and remove that attacker from the premises. The two are not mutually acceptable. Locking the kids in the classrooms. I don't know about you, but I remember the doors in the high schools and the schools that I went to, and even the colleges and university, were not particularly secure. So we can't overcome this by design. We have to use social engineering. So instead of just grabbing these kids, medicating them, and sitting them in front of a therapist, which, okay, that is going to be effective for some of them, but not all. You need a program of some sort. And unfortunately, this is going to be a hard sell because, first of all, how are you going to justify to any parent that their child might be a threat? That's a really tall order. Secondly, I don't care who you are. Work for private companies, public companies, NGOs, anywhere in between. Getting funding is an issue for everybody. Now, this funding would literally save lives, but as Art Bell once said, people aren't going to believe in global warming until they're knee deep into the waters of the Atlantic in Omaha. And he's right. Or would that be the Pacific? Doesn't matter. People don't acknowledge the problem until it becomes part of them. The only reason I consider myself part of the problem is my mother was a school teacher, my kid's in school. It is a direct problem for me. And there's literally nothing I can do about it at my present time, aside from putting forward this idea for a program. And the funny part is, you probably don't really need it. Okay, we're identifying. I'm going to drop the white because we live in the 2022s, and there's probably going to be mass unalivers that come from other races more than we think. So we need to find teenage people who are leaning towards radical elements. Now, when I say leaning, I don't mean too much. When I was growing up in high school in the 80s, there was this girl that kept a big flag of the Soviet Union in her locker. Was she a threat? No, not at all. At least not that I know of. After she graduated, anything could have happened, but the same token, she wasn't a threat to anybody. She just happened to like Marxism more than anybody else. But people leaning towards extreme ideologies. People, teenagers, I should be saying teenagers, but maybe this is something we can generalize. Teenagers who have access to weapons. Now, this is going to be the hard one. How exactly do you figure out which kid has access to a weapon, which kid doesn't, and what kind of a weapon? There's a big difference between Old Daisy, my BB rifle, and an actual weapon used to cause harm. Both will be scary, but one does way more damage. You need to identify teenagers who don't really have their social life figured out. This again is a touchy one. That's why I was hesitant with letting it come out of my mouth. Again, the cliques form. Most, if not all, high schools have their cliques. The jocks, the nerds, the goths, all those sort of people. You need to find out the ones that are in between and not accepted by anybody. You need to figure out which ones have a history. That's what I'm going to say. Which teenagers have a history of acting out. Now, acting out, I don't mean shouting back at the teacher, having a bad day and refusing to do work. Hell no, those are teenage things. Teenagers rebel. It's kind of their thing. And they're always going to. But there's a big difference between me yelling at Mr. Fridkin, who was a real teacher I had, and I never did yell at him. I didn't like him very much, but the same token, I respected him. Back on topic, though, big difference between me yelling at Mr. Fridkin and having a bad mood, and me setting fires and stealing and doing all the other stuff that vandalism that kids do. One incident here, there, whatever. We need to give the discretion to be able to say, okay, nobody got hurt. This is easy to fix. Pay some money and a fine, and we're just going to make a note on your file. But when we start ticking off these boxes, there needs to be an evaluation done. Now, we're not going to catch the true sociopaths who are able to lie with a straight face. But once we get them in front of an effective counselor, they might be able to tease that information out of them. Hey, it's a long shot program, and it's fraught with difficulty. I have no doubt that if I was to wave a magic wand and have this program in place across North America with all the funding that it needs, parents would start fighting it because they don't want a bad marker on their kid's record because it might affect them going to university and whatever dreams the parents have. I'm not saying the kids don't have dreams, but parents want to see their children succeed. And that's the final hurdle, as always. Whenever you talk about education, it's the parents. Can't live with them, can't live without them. And they're acting in their children's best interest. And this is what I feel is always going to be the thing that shuts down any sort of gun control or security inside of a school system. The parents simply don't want it to happen. Oh, you have no right to search my child's locker. Yes, it's part of school property, and if we suspect that there's a crime, we have the right to it. Make the kids sign a locker rental agreement. Whether you charge money for the locker, you don't charge money for the locker, you should still have that in place. A contract that gives you the opportunity to search. That way, when the parent comes up, and you just say, search at any time. Now, to everybody who's lost somebody in tragic circumstances, not just in school unalivings, but for anything, I want you to know the Silverlight show has the ultimate sympathy for you. We don't have a solution yet, but we're working on it. If we just take this together and magically money appears from nowhere, nobody has it. Governments don't have it. Private organizations don't have it. Nobody has the money, but everything that we're talking about costs money. And only by doing that, here's the real kicker. I'm saying it's going to be a solution. No, it's not going to solve it. All I'm trying to do is to make it so we have a chance to study these people before, and hopefully not, but then after. Because we need to figure out what the tipping point is. And nobody has a clue because so few of these youths have ever been captured alive. It doesn't happen. Part of their plan is to make sure that they do not have to face the consequences. Now that suggests to me that they're cognizant of what they are doing. They know that what they're doing is not good for anybody, and this is their ticket out. That being said, I can't say that for sure, but it happens an awful lot. So what did we discover today? Absolutely nothing, aside from it's impossible to build a school to be immune to this kind of thing. We don't have the information that we need to at the present time. And most importantly, the funding is simply not there. And the parents would never put up with it, even if we did all the above. It's an idea. It'll be on the internet if anybody needs it. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please hit like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to click the link down in the comments below. And hopefully you have a fantastic day.